Sounds like a lie, but it's really the truth. Written by C.P. Turner. Narrated by Rachel Robinson. Audiobook version copyright 2017 by C.P. Turner. All the stuff told in this novel is based on actual events that's been fictionized to protect the innocent, and especially the guilty.
Me and my heathenish attitude. You might think Angel Eloise is a funny name because so many people make me out to be the opposite. An angel, I mean. But in the famous words of Jessica Rabbit, I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way. My daddy always said if I continued in my ways, I'd end up going where the real bad people go. That's my stepdaddy. He's a Baptist. A real fire-breathing, sulfur and brimstone, burn in hell for all eternity, full immersion Baptist. My other dad, my bio dad, he's a Episcopalian. They don't believe in hell, the Episcopalians, I mean, or heaven, or Jesus, or God, or anything for that matter. Well, they do sorta. But they say them's just symbols, what can't be understood. At least that's what my stepdaddy says. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me explain what I mean. It gets awful hot in McCaulleysville, Carolina. That's South Carolina, which is where I come from, is why I mention it. During the summer, the heat creeps up and peels the paint off the walls of the houses. It's that hot, and there ain't nothing you can do but sit around and watch the sweat drip off your nose, unless you go to the mall, which a lot of people do, but I think that's so stupid because so many stupid people do that and come wheeling out of the Walmart with their shopping baskets full, their fat kids stuffed into the shopping carts, in and amongst all the stuff they just bought to replace all the other stuff they got at home that looks exactly the same and works just as good, except it ain't new, and with this look on their faces like they've just received the rapture, like they've seen Jesus himself come down and told them they was going to heaven that very day if only they'd go out and do the shopping mall and buy some new stuff. I know a whole lot about rapturing and Jesus because both my daddies are preachers. The one my mother had me with and the one she's living with now, but I'll explain that later. Like I was saying, all there is for me to do in McCaulleysville is sit in my room under the swamp cooler till it drips a hole in the top of my head and stare at pictures of the ocean. Not the ocean we got here, a couple hours over in Myrtle Beach. That's a piddly little ocean with little piddly waves that wouldn't wash a youngin's little toy boat. But the Pacific Ocean, way over on the West Coast, over in California, where things aren't so stupid, where the waves aren't so piddly, and where things are so all blessed good and boring and stupid all the time. If it seems to you that I have a bad attitude, and I probably do, I'll explain why as we go on. McCaulleysville is named after some Civil War hero who led a charge against the Yankees or something and kept something like 1 million slaves on his plantation hereabouts, and whipped all the men and slaves and had sex and babies with all the women slaves. So half the people round here, both black and whites, descended from him. And you can't throw a rock without hitting a Macaulay. But when I pointed out in my history class project that anybody who done all that bad stuff wasn't no hero in anybody's history book, and proposed that we name the town Martin Luther Kingsburg after you know who, well, you can imagine they made me out to be the bad one, all right, with some sort of heathenish attitude, and by the time I'm done talking to you, you'll probably have one too. Then we'll both be had. First off, it'd probably help if I explain who I am. And the next best way to know somebody is to meet their family. So let me tell you about mine. My family is so big, that's one of the stupid parts, that I've got 2 of everything. It seems like every part of my family comes in pairs like we was lining up for a pleasures cruise on Noah's Ark. I've got 2 grandmas, Grandma Lucy May and Grandma Betty Lou. They live in a little shack out in the interstate, and Grandma Betty Lou is always yelling at Grandma Lucy May on account that Grandma Betty Lou weighs 350 pounds and don't have no legs. Well, it's not on account of that Grandma Betty Lou is always yelling. She's always hollering at Grandma Lucy May to bring her pain pills. But Grandma Lucy May is very strict and won't give Grandma Betty Lou more pills than the doctor allows. So Grandma Betty Lou lies in her hog waller of a bed in their wee little tar paper shack out on the interstate hollering away like a hog stuck in a fence for her pain pills. It hurts awful bad, Lucy May, Grandma Betty Lou will shout over and over and over again. If that ain't stupid, I don't know what is. And that's why I have to sleep with a fan. I know that don't make sense, but it's what my English teacher calls foreshadowing, which is another way of saying I'll fill in the parts of the jigsaw later. My daddy, I guess you might call him my real father, he's a Baptist preacher right here in McCauleyville. I say my real father because he's the one that made me with my mama, my real mama, not the lady my daddy married later on, which is not my real mama, even though she tries to make me feel obliged to call herself that, but I never do. Not because she ain't nice, which she is in her own way, but just a spider, and my daddy because he screwed around on my mama. That's a real stupid thing for a preacher to do, don't you think? And that's why they ain't married anymore. And my mama's now married to an Episcopalian minister. The difference being between a Baptist preacher and an Episcopalian minister, being the Episcopalian has a college degree and don't yell so loud and sweat so much when he's preaching. Also, he don't screw around on my mama like my son of a bitch real daddy did, though I can't say that has anything to do with his being a Baptist. I guess you can tell I have a bad attitude towards my daddy, too. Aside from my mama, who I've already told you a little bit about, there's the lady my real daddy married. Her name's Deborah. She's a big-haired woman with fake boobs she got over in Columbia and stupider than a pile of cow turds. I mean, she says to me one day, Dick was gone for 4 hours the other day. Dick's my daddy's name. As I explain more, you'll see how appropriate it is. But you're probably thinking I'm a dirty-minded person for even thinking of such things. Anyway, she's saying to me, I don't know where he was and he won't tell me. He just keeps saying he had stuff to do. What do you think he was doing all that time? So when she asked me this, I think, duh. What was he doing for hours at a time when he was cheating on my real mama with you? But I clamped down on my tongue, 'cause I figured blurting something that mean and nasty would make me stupider than her. So I just say, I don't know, could I have some more lemonade, please? But then I'm sipping on my lemonade, and my attitude towards my daddy is getting badder and badder, not Christian at all, as in, honor thy cheating daddy and thy stupid stepmother. And I just come out and ask all innocent like, are there any ladies at the church that have been in special need of ministering lately? Big old hair Deborah's hand was shaking so bad she couldn't hardly pour me another glass of lemonade. Had to pour it for myself. You see, my daddy's very handy at ministering to ladies in need, like have lost their husbands and might be looking for a spare husband that just happened to be laying around unused, like my stepmother's old husband. He wasn't old, he was just the one before my father took her over. But he was dead, so I guess that counts, sorta. He was crushed by a thresher machine he'd been trying to fix. He was in a hurry, seeing as a storm was coming, and had to make an adjustment, but didn't want to waste any time stopping the thing. So he'd got right up in it while the blades was running, and it rolled right up over the top of him and spit him out in a 500-pound bale of alfalfa. They had to bury him in a funny-shaped square coffin on account of they couldn't separate him from the alfalfa straw. And my stepmama needed an awful load of ministering after that, you can imagine, which my real mama objected to when she found out, said nobody didn't need that much ministering. And which is why she divorced my father. But I'd have divorced him too, if I had the chance. 'Cause one time before that, my daddy was so busy ministering all night that he missed my 10th birthday party. But do you think my mama said diddly squat about that? And do I need to tell you the answer to the question? And does it sound like I have a bad attitude towards my mother too? I reckon I'm just a bad girl on all counts. But I can't help it that everybody else is just so stupid it hurts. And I'd rather be bad like I am than stupid as a wood door like some of them. And I have pairs of aunts and cousins, Cousin Billy and Cousin Bobby, Aunt Sushi Lulu and Aunt Sassy and scads more. I'm naming only a few to give you an idea about the size of the whole stupid menagerie, really, like some God-blessed Noah's Ark and all the relatives going up 2 by 2. But only one gay uncle. He's all by himself. He's not really totally gay on account of he's married and has 6 children. 3 sets of twins, 3 pairs, you'll notice, just like Noah. But he sneaks off and does gay things with other men. Who else? But, of course, I'm the bad one for noticing that stuff ain't what it's made out to be, which is what I always do, but I'll explain that later, too. And a lot of other stuff I can't think of right now. My two grandmas. My two grandmas lived in a little shack on the edge of this field where some people growed soybeans, which is sort of like black-eyed peas, except nobody eats them directly. They just grind them into flour-like and put that into food to give it more protein, or to make fake milk or veggie burgers that fool people who can't eat meat for one reason or another or don't wanna, into thinking that they really are eating meat. Not that my grandmas do any farming. They're too old for that, and besides, Grandma Betty Lou don't got no leg. She had 'em amputated on account of her diabetes, which is to say she had to have 'em cut off. So she wouldn't be much good out in the field, except I suppose they could prop her up in a tractor and she could drive around all day if she had a mind to. That would be a sight, wouldn't it? My grandma sitting on top of some old tractor like a giant roly-poly beach ball, teetering and tottering, fit to roll off first time she hits a bump. Did I mention that she's awful big? I don't want to cast suspicions and say fat, because it's not really her fault, bless her heart. Since they cut off her legs, she hadn't had nothing to do but lay in bed all day long and eat Grandma Lucy May's angel food cake. Grandma Lucy May makes the most delicious angel food cake, which I was always partial to when I was coming up. I always thought they were made special for me, my name being Angel Louise, which made sense in a way. After all, there was no Grandma Betty Lou food cake or Daddy food cake or any other kind of food cake except Angel Louise. It made me feel kind of special until my daddy smacked me one day and said, "You ain't no bargain, girl. Less it be a bargain from the 5 and dime." That made everybody laugh, like as to say I was cheap and no count. So I didn't tell nobody after that how special I felt, but kept it inside me like a secret little treasure. Guess I was waiting for somebody to come along and agree with me. But I'll get to that part later. Sometimes Grandma Betty Lou would get in terrible pain, and she'd set to hollering, "Lucy May! Lucy May!" to have Grandma Lucy May bring her pain pills, which was little blue and white pills that Grandma Betty Lou got off the Medicate doctor, who wasn't the best doctor in town, but he was all she could get. You see, he had a reputation on account of something he did long ago with a little girl that didn't turn out so good and that people still allude to, which is a word that means they talk about it without coming right out and saying what it was he done, but kind of start the sentence and raise their eyebrows and then look to see there's a child in the room like me and stop. But everybody knows what they could have said if the child hadn't been there. But this incident made it so he couldn't get no regular patients, so he practices on people the county sends over and such. I guess it's a sign of how good he was that he was still, after all these years, practicing, like he hadn't got good enough to just do his doctoring. He still has to practice. Just like when I was learning to play the trombone, I'd practice and practice and practice awful hard till my daddy yelled at me to take that fool thing out in the soybean field. 'Cause no matter how hard I practiced, no matter how much heart I put into my practicing, I just couldn't make myself no better at playing the thing. All I wanted to do was give people pleasure listening to me. But I just ended up annoying them so. I guess the doctor's sort of like me that way. When Grandma Betty Lou set up a hollering for her little blue and white pills, "Lucy May! I hurt Lucy May! Bring me my pills!" Grandma Lucy May would shout back, "It ain't time yet, Betty Lou. You have to wait till the doctor says. I can't give you no more pills till it's time." And then she'd go outside into her garden, 'cause she kept herself a little vegetable garden outside where she growed peas and corn and tomatoes and such like that she fixed up and made people eat from time to time. Not that she needed to, 'cause between her food stamps from being so poor and all the food that my folks and all my uncles and aunts brought over, and my daddy was always taking her shopping. All the time I was growing up, I remember my daddy saying, "I'm going over to take Grandma to the Piggly Wiggly." It's like they went shopping every blessed day. Well, between all that shopping and the garden and seeing how they didn't have nothing else to do sides eat, those were two big old wiggly piggly grandmas I had. I don't mean it to be mean, but the truth's the truth. But Grandma Lucy may go out into the garden so she wouldn't have to listen to Grandma Betty Lou calling from her bed. I seen a calf stuck in a fence once, and it was hollering and bawling for its mama something terrible. And all the time it moved and tried to get loose, the barbed wire cut it more and tangled it more till it was just a mess of hamburger meat, and it bawled and cried even louder. And that's when Grandma Betty Lou minded me of I heard her crying out in the bed and for her little white and blue pills. And one day, when Grandma Lucy May was outside in her garden hunkering down in the dirt like some old taffeta hog rooting in the soil, and Grandma Betty Lou was setting up her bawling, I did something bad. I snuck into the place where I spied Grandma Lucy May keep the little blue and white pills, and I took 'em to Grandma Betty Lou. I know it was a bad thing to do, 'cause it wasn't the proper time for her to have her pills, but I remember how Grandma Betty Lou was the one who made the cake especially in my honor, and I just couldn't let her lie there in her bed, hollering like no calf tangled up in a chain of barbed wire, and I gave her a pill. She took it with shaking hands and gobbled it down real greedy-like. Bless you, child. It had been a long time since anybody blessed me, and I guess I needed it on account of my doing something so against the doctor's orders. And while she was lying there panting real hard like she was fighting the pain, I parceled her out another one, and she took that. And presently a calm, peaceful look came over her. And after I took the pills back and slipped them back in their little hidey place, I went back and sat with Grandma Betty Lou, and we had the pleasantest time talking about things going on at school and what boys I was partial to and such like, till Grandma Lucy May came and seed us. She looked kind of sideways at Grandma Betty Lou, and she looked awful hard at me like she 'spected something, but I just smiled as sweetly as I could, and she couldn't say nothing on account of she didn't know nothing for sure. But she did wait an extra half hour to give Grandma Betty Lou her pill, and might have waited even longer, excepting I piped up as innocent as I could, "Oh, isn't it time for Grandma Betty Lou's pill?" And then she had to give up the medicine, but you could tell she didn't like doing it, parceling it out like a poor person at the market counting out their tiny last little bit of change. And you could tell from the way she studied the bottle, she was trying to pry its secret out. And when she put the bottle back, it wasn't in the same place but a new hidey place, where she thought I wouldn't be able to find it. Grandma Lucy May would say it was God's will that Grandma Betty Lou was suffering like that, and it wasn't for us to go against the doctor's orders. But I couldn't no way see through to what the two had to do with each other. Though maybe if I paid more attention to Grandma Lucy May's Bible verses, that would have been more clearer to me, and I would have done the right thing instead of the bad thing that I did. After that, whenever I came over, I rooted about the house to find them pills. There wasn't no hidey place I could find, partly 'cause after a while Grandma Lucy May would run out of new hidey places and forget she'd already used one, and I'd already learned all the old ones, and I would find them pills and I'd give one or two to Grandma Betty Lou. And I suppose it wasn't right what I did, but it seemed to make her so happy, and she and I would have the pleasantest time after the pain eased away from her. I fool an old lady. Out back at the neighbor lady's place, her name was Miss McGillicuddy, and she was the cussediest old lady you ever did see. She was always shouting at us kids not to trample on her petunias or walk on her grass, but most of all to keep my dog Smelly away from her rabbits. Smelly was a big old black Labrador. He even got his name because when he was a puppy after he'd ate, he let out these humongously smelly farts that drove everybody from the room, which is why we took to feeding him outside. And, well, Smelly liked to get into old Miss McGillicuddy's rabbits, which is what I was trying to get around to, which is that Miss McGillicuddy used to keep a regular rabbit hotel out back of her place, with the rabbit hutches stacked 2 and 3 high, forming a kind of half circle with a tree stump in the middle. Miss McGillicuddy, she'd be petting and feeding and cleaning those rabbits near every day. It was like they was her babies. I don't know if she had her any real kids. Them rabbits seemed to do just as good the way she fussed over 'em so. And the funny thing was, every Sunday Miss McGillicuddy used to go out to her rabbits and sit on the tree stump with her Bible and read to 'em like they was her flock and she was the preacher, which everybody knows was a foolish thing on account there wasn't no such thing as lady preachers. Her rabbits would be munching on their bunny kibble or lettuce or their carrots and whatnot like they was a blessed communion wafers. And old Miss McGillicuddy would be sitting there on the tree stump in her Sunday floral dress and Sunday bonnet in the spring and summer, and wrapped in her overcoat during the cold months, and go through her sermon, reading from a passage of the Old Testament, then something from the Godspells, and then something from the Letters or Acts, all the time working herself into a fervor to save them bunny souls. So you can imagine the fit it put her in when Smelly would get out of his yard and into her rabbit hutches. He'd be running back and forth, barking and carrying on. his tail wagging and him leaping up against the rabbit hutches like he was trying to knock 'em over and bust into 'em, and Miss McGillicuddy would be screaming, "I'm going to send that dog to the pound. I'm going to call up the pound, and they're going to come and take that animal away, and they're going to euthanize him. That's what I'm going to do if you don't keep him in your yard." I didn't know exactly what euthanize meant at the time, but it didn't sound good. And my mama later told me it meant to put him to sleep, which at first I couldn't figure out why Smelly needed any help going to sleep. He seemed to do that well enough on his own. But then Loopy told me it really meant she was going to have him killed. So every time Miss McGillicuddy threatened to have my Smelly put to sleep, he'd be barking. Miss McGillicuddy'd be screaming she was going to call the pound, and I'd be trying to tug him away from there, crying and begging with her to give my Smelly one more chance. He didn't mean no harm. He was just a dog, doing what come natural, which didn't seem to cut no ice with her at all. One day, I came home from school, and there was Smelly lying in the middle of the lawn with a big grin on his face and one of Miss McGillicuddy's rabbits between his paws. The rabbit was all dirty like Smelly had chased it through the mud and thrashed it about. Here I was in a fix. Miss McGillicuddy would sure have Smelly euthanized now if she found out about Smelly killing one of her precious fool rabbits. As a Christian, I'm supposed to love all living creatures, but I guess you can tell I had a bad attitude towards Miss McGillicuddy's rabbits because they was going to be the death of my poor old black Labrador. As soon as Smelly saw me, I knew he'd done something bad. And just in case he was in doubt, I told him so. "Bad dog," I said. "That old lady's going to have you put to sleep now, and that means having you killed, too." He put his head low so his big jaw was covering that bunny, like he thought maybe if he just lay there, I wouldn't notice the white bunny fur peeking out from under his massive head and paws, and all the while I was yelling at him and scolding him, I was in a terrible fright. He just sort of lay there and rumbled, this low growling like, coming up from his big black chest. But I weren't scared of him. I knowed him when he was a puppy. I'd found him wandering down the middle of the street, just a swollen-bellied, lice-ridden, mangy, as close to death's trap door as you can get without falling in little, mutt as you'd ever seen. And I took him in, and even when the vet said the poor little creature's near gone, might as well put him down, which is another way of saying to kill him. It's funny how many words we have for to kill something because we don't want to say the real word. And I wasn't going to lose him now, not to one of Mrs. McGillicuddy's fool rabbits. So I swatted that stupid dog on the head and beat him on his butt and scolded him and told him how disappointed I was in him and what was going to happen to him till he finally saw some sense and let me have that rabbit. It was then I knew what I had to do. I took that rabbit inside and I washed it up good. I shampooed it twice, just like it says on the bottle. Repeat as necessary, even though they wasn't thinking about no dead rabbits when they wrote those instructions. When I thought it was clean as a rabbit ought to be, I took out my mama's blow dryer, and I blowed it dry and fluffed up its fur till it was all nice-like and clean and white as a Easter bunny. I even put a daub of my mama's mascara around its eyes where it seemed to lost some color from its tangling with that fool dog. Then came the trickiest part. I stole back over to Miss McGillicuddy's yard, thanking the Lord she wasn't home just then. There was the cage door hanging open. That's where I figured probably Miss McGillicuddy had missed latching it all the way and where Smelly had gotten inside at the rabbit. So I slipped the critter back into the cage and eased the door shut and latched it tight, hoping all the time Miss McGillicuddy'd find it and think it died natural in his sleep. The day seemed to go on forever till Miss McGillicuddy came back. I was out in the front yard pretending to play in the dirt when she finally come back. She'd been to see the preacher, no doubt, petitioning for her beloved bunny souls to be admitted into heaven or something. I could tell, the part about being to the preacher, not the bunnies, because she had on her best dress and her shiny black shoes and her fancy wax straw hat like she'd been trying to impress him with how godly she was. Though what that get-up had to do with being godly, I never could figure out no ways. She came traipsing up the walkway, and I say, "'Lo, Miss McGillicuddy," in a low, soft voice, not loud enough that it would call attention to itself, but loud enough so she'd know I wasn't lacking proper respect, and crouched there not breathing for the longest time waiting. I was picturing in my mind the steps she was taking in her house, setting her bag down on the kitchen table where she kept it, walking into the bathroom and taking a pee, standing up and washing her hands, and then going outside to say hello to her damn rabbits. Excuse my language, but I just said that to express how I was feeling at the time. I wasn't too fond of them stupid beasts at the moment. That's when I heard the scream. She screamed long and loud like a fire truck siren, so that it pierced inside your skull like a 4-penny nail. Presently, my daddy and Mama came running out of our house and around to hers to see what was happening. You can imagine, I was all in a sweat fearing that my little trick was going to be found out and that I'd have to tell the truth. Something which, in my wicked heart, I didn't want to do. And tell them what I'd done, and more important, what my black Labrador Smelly had gone and done. When I got there to her little bunny hotel, Miss McGillicuddy was standing in front of the dead rabbit's cage, pointing her finger like a ghost and panting like she'd just run a marathon. And in between her panting and gulping down great gulps of air, explaining in this high-pitched voice, "I buried Jeremiah 3 days ago." She'd given all her bunnies biblical names like. "And now he's come back from the dead, risen like Lazarus from the dead. Only the fright must have too much for his little heart, and he died again. Died and gone to heaven. Hallelujah! My prayers have been answered. Hallelujah!" My mom and daddy don't know what to make of all this. And on the way back to our house, when we're safely away from the Lazarus bunny raised from the dead, my daddy stopped me on the lawn and bent down into my face and asked me, and that wasn't loud, but it had an edge of steel in it, "Angel Louise, do you know what happened? Anything about this?" "No, sir," I lied, trying hard as all get out to look as innocent as possible. "Angel Louise?" my mama asked, bending down low to me too, like as if I know anything I better say it. But I was deathly afraid for Smelly, and I figured it was best to pretend to be pure tea ignorant. "No, ma'am," I said, but I couldn't look at her directly because she had this crazy eye that liked to look straight through me. And I took to studying my shoes like suddenly they was the most interesting things I ever done seen in the whole wide world. I was never allowed to forget the wicked thing I done in deceiving that old woman, 'cause after that, Miss McGillicuddy never let up on her miracle bunny, never missing a chance to put people in mind of the rabbit that rose from the dead. And when she finally died, we went to her funeral. I saw that at her instructions they put on her tombstone one last reminder of the wicked trick I'd played on her. Gone to heaven, but preceded by her beloved Jeremiah,